Good morning. It is 5:47 a.m. on Tuesday, December 15th. Excuse me, 2015. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, I almost allowed my new morning routine to be disrupted already on day 2 just by kind of inadvertently staying up too late last night. Um, but, I let my alarm do its thing, so less sleep last night than ideal. But this is how you readjust your body rhythms, right? So uh, I'm up. um, One of the things that I did last night is that I finally received the Doctor Who level pack for Lego Dimensions and had a lot of fun with that. Having a little Lego version of the Doctor is entertaining. Um, I think it's a good level. In fact, I think of all of the different level packs, that one in Portal 2 might be my favorite. Um, Back to the Future, I love having all the characters and stuff, and the level is okay, but it what I think wasn't uh, my favorite. I haven't done as much exploring of the adventure world part of either of those, though. Anyway, though, what I thought I would actually spend the bulk of today talking about is two new trailers that came out just recently. I know at least one of them was only out yesterday. Maybe the other one was a couple of days. I can't remember for sure when that one came out. But there's no new trailers now for Independence Day Resurgence and for Star Trek Beyond. Um, Independence Day Resurgence, it's interesting just because at least in the very narrow perspective of what are the general sort of comments that I saw on the internet, just as far as my normal mode of surfing, like not especially looking for what people thought, but just what do I see people talking about. People seem to be generally pretty enthusiastic about the Independence Day Resurgence one, um, and then pretty negative on the Star Trek Beyond one. And I think all of that comes down to a matter of expectation. Independence Day Resurgence, like unless you were really following it and knew in advance that they were making it all, it feels a little bit like it comes out of nowhere. It's like nobody was waiting for it, but it's also like, oh, well, here's this thing I didn't even know they were going to do. That's kind of cool, and so there's no there's no real baggage, right? It's more just a matter of, hey, this movie from way back when was a little bit dumb, but mostly kind of fun, and so hey, well, why not do another one? And I'm actually fairly intrigued with the idea of figuring out what the history is, between just in terms of the amount of devastation that was caused in the first movie. To want to know is like, well, how did that affect how time went forward? I'm interested. Um, but meanwhile, Star Trek, obviously, being such a big property, carries a much larger burden in terms of fan expectation. And generally, when I've seen people being very negative about it, it's just generally in the sense of like, this doesn't feel like Star Trek. And I get that. I really, really do. And I will agree further that my preference for Star Trek would be to be kind of a deeper, more thoughtful science fiction exploration and not necessarily just focusing on being sci-fi action movie. That would be my preference. But the problem is that a lot of people seem really determined that the movie is supposed to be made for them specifically, regardless of whether or not that movie that they're imagining would have ever been able to be made. This is a little bit like some of the criticisms I've heard of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 Kickstarter, in that it doesn't include all of the original people who worked on it. And, I don't want to totally equate the two situations, except to just make a general point of the TV and movie industry is complicated and it has a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of money involved, and you can't always get something made, right? And especially when you're talking about something like Star Trek or Mystery Science Theater 3000, where there was a big gap, where for a while there really wasn't anything going on. The problem is you can't just demand to have more of what it used to be, because what it used to be had already been declared not good enough anymore, in terms of making money. And so if the only way to get a new Star Trek movie was to have it be like Star Trek the motion picture, which I don't know that anyone's really asking for, but, or, at the very least, let's say, Star Trek the Undiscovered Country, let's say, or, something that's a little bit more thoughtful. But the problem is that if that was the only acceptable Star Trek to be made, something that was less action heavy and more focused on the more thoughtful aspects of what Star Trek is, supposed to be, well, that movie just probably never gets greenlit. And so the question is not, would you rather have this version of Star Trek Beyond that's obviously very influenced by like Guardians of the Galaxy and other action movies? Would you rather have that Star Trek or no Star Trek? Because that's the actual choice, not do you want this Star Trek or some other hypothetical Star Trek. Now, that's not to say you're not allowed to have a preference. I certainly have a preference too. But I watched this and I'm just saying, well, as an audience, this is the kind of movie that we have told studios we wanted by going to see other movies like it, contrasted with movies that are more like we say we want Star Trek to be, that we don't go to see as much. And that's just kind of the fact of it. I mean, in some ways, I sort of reconciled a long time ago that by and large, the movies that I love the most often don't do that well, or at the very least, there's frequently cases where the movies that I really love don't do as well. And my camera seems to be frozen on my screen, and I'm already over 8 minutes. So instead of just continuing to ramble about this, I think I will talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes. All right.